This week on BleepinJeep.com we're going to get back to Project Tetanus. We're working on the front end, the front axle. Today we're going to be working on the calipers. I'm going to show you how to take your rusty, beat up nasty calipers like this and rebuild them to look like this. Now this caliper is off of an 87 Comanche. I also have an 87 Cherokee that has this same style. It's a little bit different than the newer ones. The newer ones have a caliper that looks like this, and that is the full caliper. These retaining brackets that keep the pads from shifting when you brake are cast into the knuckle on the axle. They don't come off like this one does. So I'm not sure what the year range is, what years use this style, what years use this style. This is out of a 92 YJ. Just be aware yours may differ a little bit, but the process is going to be very similar. So I'm going to go ahead and show you on this older style caliper how I did the rebuild. Now that we've removed the caliper, the first step, let me get these mounting bolts out of the way. The first step is to separate the two halves. We do that using a 7mm Allen wrench, and we remove, there's two, they're basically like a bolt, but I'll show you here, but you remove these two pins. Now these ones are in worse shape than the other side. I'm probably going to have to either really do some cleaning or replace these. I'll set those aside. Now that is going to allow us to get the two halves apart like this. Remove your old brake pads. These ones are really kind of rusty. I'm going to see if we can knock them out. Like that. Hang on to these retaining pins for now. There should be two of them. I'm missing one on this, so I'm going to have to probably get a rebuild kit. Now let's get to work on the piston assembly. These two bushings that this piston assembly slides back and forth on, they have these little, I don't know if they're Teflon plastic, I think they're just plastic. They have these little liners. So you need to remove those. Now we're going to remove these rubber boots. These are still in decent shape, so I may be able to reuse them. Either way, I'm going to be careful getting them out. Try not to destroy them. They're a lot easier to remove if you take those Teflon liners out first. Now we want to get this piston out of the cast assembly. The easiest way to get it out, once you've drained all the fluid, is just take a blower, an air blower with a rubber tip, and shove it down in that hole. Keep your fingers out of the way, and you'll see why here in a second. Because of that. Probably don't need that much pressure. Whew, okay, it's apart. There are two seals on this style caliper. We need to remove both of them. There's an inner seal and this outer. This is actually more like almost like a dust cover. But the first one is this inner, and it's got a square profile, and that's what seals against the piston inside. Next we'll remove this rubber dust boot. To remove the dust boot, we're just going to reach in here and gently pry up like that. We're going to do that all the way around. Now our dust boot comes loose. Now the only other thing to do is remove the bleeder screw right here. Once that bleeder screw's out, we can start to derust these calipers. You can use a box end wrench or a 3/8 inch socket to remove this bleeder screw. Now we can reuse this if it's not damaged. You want to just inspect it for damage. This one looks good. Now I'm going to derust the two halves of the caliper using electrolysis. If you haven't seen our how-to video on electrolysis, I'll post a link in the description below. You can go check out the tutorial on that. It's a real great way to remove rust from kind of weird shaped parts like this. Alright, so I've taken the two halves out of the electrolysis. I hit them with a wire brush on a wire wheel, cleaned them right up, painted them with that same hammered paint that we used on the rear axle, and you can see it turned out awesome. Just turned out excellent. So now you can see the inside of the caliper, how clean that is. Just beautiful. So now let's get putting them back together. First step, I'm going to want to put the piston assembly back in here, and we start by putting in the piston gasket. I'm going to lube this up with some brake fluid. Get it good and lubed. And then I will go ahead and put that down in the groove here. Now I want to make sure that's seated correctly, that it's not twisted or anything in the bore. Feels good. So next step, I'm going to put the actual piston in there. Going to lube it just a little bit with some of this brake fluid. Get it nice and lubed. And then I'm going to slide it down in. Now these can be difficult to get in. We'll see how easy this goes in. There we go. Alright. Now, I'm going to go ahead and put the dust seal. And I'm just going to push it in finger tight to begin with. And then very gently tap it in using something very dull, like this socket extension, or a very dull screwdriver. It looks pretty good. Now I'm going to extend the piston just a little bit, not very much. In fact, I don't want it to get out of hand, so I'm going to put this in there, but I'm going to extend that piston a little bit with my air hose here. And now I can drop this dust boot down around where it goes. There's a little groove that it fits into. Okay, we are in. I'm going to go ahead and compress that piston all the way. Let's make sure everything went in where it was supposed to go here. I'm going to extend it one more time just to be sure. That looks pretty good. Really good. Okay. Now we're going to insert these sleeves. I've cleaned these up with some simple green. The rubber was not rotten. It was all in pretty good shape, so I don't mind reusing these. Lubed them up pretty good with grease internally. This extension goes to the outside. There's one side. There's the other. Now we reinsert the plastic sleeves. I'm going to give them a real good coating of grease. Push them in there till they seat. Now the pins cleaned up pretty good, so I'm going to go ahead and reuse them. Get those good and greased up. They go in threads first. Make sure you don't mess up that plastic sleeve, that these slide inside that sleeve. These need to slide freely. That's how your caliper is going to move as the pad wears. That feels really good. Alright, let's work on this other side for a second. Alright, let's get this other side of the caliper put together before we screw the two sides together. So I'm going to go ahead and slide the inner pad on. Now I'll put the retaining clips, these spring clips, in. Now you'll have to compress these clips a little bit to get the outer pad on. Now once those pads are in place, like that, now we can put the two sides of the caliper back together. Like so. We go ahead and thread these back together. Make sure you don't cross thread these. So I'm just going to start them by hand. That should slide freely on those pins like that. And that is now your completed rebuilt caliper assembly with new brake pads. I just got to stick the bleeder screw down on the bottom, and we're ready for install. That looks better, doesn't it? Man, that is minty fresh. Woo! Look at that. Well, that's it for this week. Thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe our videos so we can keep them coming. And join me next week for another how-to out of Project Tetanus. Thanks, guys.